Day 4 of the Sinquefield Cup, and we've had huge drama. Now, I'm sure you've seen this all over YouTube, on your chess feeds and all of this stuff, so you probably know what's going on. I'm going to give my take on this before we then start with this Firouzja Hans Niemann game. So on day 4, Magnus Carlsen did not show for his game against Shakhmatyarov. Now, he put out a tweet a bit afterwards, not really giving a reason around it, just saying, thanks to St. Louis, I've decided not to play. And then he linked this YouTube clip of Jose Mourinho, this famous Premier League football manager or soccer manager, however you want to say it, saying, look, I don't want to say too much, I'll get in trouble. Now, on the same day, we then saw security measures increased around the chess. So they delayed the feed. So as the St. Louis Chess Club, Peter Svidler, Yasser, Alejandro, as they were playing back the moves, that was on delay, not just going out live as they normally would. Then there was also some extra security stuff going on, blah, blah, blah. So Magnus hasn't said anything. The organisers haven't said anything. Nothing official as of yet when I'm making this 6th of September, midday-ish UK. But the implication seems to be that Magnus has suggested that he feels that Hans may have cheated to win their game. Who knows? Like, no one knows this yet. Magnus hasn't said. But it seems to be the implication. But what I don't like about this is that when I was watching the feed yesterday, when Alejandro was going through the games with all of the players afterwards, he had the Lee Chess engine running. If you watch back the replay, for the Fabi game at the end of the show, also for Aronian's game, which came before Hans. So the engine was on for Aronian. They analysed with the engine on, interview, blah, blah, blah. Then he did the Hans interview, no engine on, also left it off for Alireza's interview. Then the engine went back on when it was Fabi's interview. And it was like they're treating him with suspicion now, almost trying to catch him out or something. And what I really don't like about this is this kind of trial by hearsay, speculation. Like, if you're going to turn the engine off, turn it off for all the players. Or if you're going to leave it on for all the players. Don't just turn it off for the guy that's been accused, potentially, of cheating. Because this is that classic thing where you start trialing someone before you actually do it properly or have evidence, etc. So they need to do this properly, get evidence. That's my point of view. Before you start doing things like turning the engine off just for Hans, as if to catch him out. I think that's out of order, really, the way they did that. Anyway, that's my rant aside. I don't know if he's cheating or not. If he was, it'd be incredibly difficult to do. Nothing in his play suggests he is to me. It looks like he's just playing great chess, up-and-coming player, still making mistakes in there too. Who knows, we could turn out wrong, but I'm not necessarily seeing he's cheating right now, would be my tuppence at this stage. Right, that piece aside, on with the chess. So let's see it here. Hans Niemann had white, Alireza Firouzja black. Tons of eyes on this game. Let's see what happened. So Hans goes e4, e5 from Alireza, and we quickly head down this Italian game with bishop to c4, knight f6 played, d3 from Hans, bishop c5 comes outside, very aggressive move, now c3 played, so supporting d4 later, d6 from Alireza, and both players now castled, rook to e1, and there's lots of different moves from this position, h6, a6, a5, bunch of moves. But here Alireza goes bishop to b6, also been seen many times, but not as common. Now we had a4 played, Alireza goes a5, takes some space himself, h3, h6 inserted, and now the knight comes to a3, might look slightly strange to put it on the edge of the board, but the idea here is that the knight wants to come to this c4 square, pressure the bishop, once this one actually moves out the way. So Alireza now goes knight e7, classic kind of re-manoeuvring of that knight, frees the c-pawn, and now because that knight's left c6 and the pressure on d4, excuse me, now Hans can go pawn to d4. So he strikes in the centre here. The knight comes to g6, holding this pawn. Oh, and just here actually to briefly say, you could have actually captured here, pawn recaptured, and then gone d5. Quite a nice continuation for black actually. The Lee Chess engine here, Stockfish gives it level on a low depth. I don't know if you run it for longer it would say different, but certainly a decent way for black to respond. Instead, knight g6 from Alireza, he just covers the pawn like that. And now we had the bishop dropping all the way back to f1, so it clears the square for this knight. And also it comes to f1 because it's a kind of defensive measure around the king rather than coming here. So from f1, it now supports these light squares here. And if Alireza ever tried to get something going on the dark squares, you know, with a knight here or this one like this and all of that, well, it's harder to play g3 when you've weakened this square. But now the bishop just starts to add some protection around any kind of these sacrifices. So c6 now from Alireza, anticipates knight to c4, the bishop tucks back, and now Hans actually simply takes on e5. Not a forced move. I often talk about the fact that when you've got the central pawns, why resolve too soon? Why not hold attention? Make it difficult for your opponent. But here Hans decides to take immediately. Now the knight recaptured. Peter Svidler pointed out something really interesting in the studio here, that if you go with the pawn, then sometimes these kind of endgames can get a bit uncomfortable for black. So say you go bishop e3, now there's a small tactic here. If you take the pawn, then there's bishop b6. You open the attack of this rook on this one, plus this piece is attacked. And if you trade here, it's not helping. Still 2 pieces attacked, and this one, etc. So you can't snap the pawn on e4. Say bishop e6 instead. Now knight f to d2, and these endgames can just be a bit more comfortable for white. b4 coming, and this knight looking a bit clumsy on g6. How is it necessarily going to get into the game, especially if g3 comes or something? So that's why instead of taking with the pawn, Alireza goes with the knight here, you know, according to Peter Svidler. Now we had bishop f4 played, pressuring that knight, and so Alireza decides to chop, queen recaptures, and then he liberates with pawn to d5. Now Hans pins that pawn. He brings the rook to the centre, comfortable edge for white, and black has to unravel here. Now you can't start taking this pawn. You might think, well, after takes here, I'm picking up your queen. Yes, you can take, but I take back the rook, but your bishop's hanging at the end of the line here, so this is one of the big problems. No good, white's a piece up. So that really truly is a pin. Instead, bishop e6 was played, bolsters this pawn, and now different options for Hans. He could maintain some tension here, say with a move like queen g3 already, but he goes e5, he takes that space, although in doing so, he does close off his bishop now, closes down the rooks to an extent, so it's a double-edged move. Alireza now drops back with the knight. Technically knight e4 looks a bit more active. You force this knight now to move away, say knight d2, and okay, game goes on, black should be doing okay. You now cover the g3 square from the queen sliding across, but Alireza goes to d7 here, expecting that this knight just has to move now. You've broken the pin, the knight is attacked, but this is where Hans plays something exceptional. So he goes queen to g3, giving an entire piece if Alireza wants to take it. Because after bishop takes here, you're threatening mate, g6 blocks the mate, but then there's just a bunch of attacking ideas. Now it's a very deep sacrifice because you're not immediately winning, but you can start doing things like pawn h4, h5, very dangerous. Maybe the f-pawn one day. Bishop g5 is also a very, very tricky line. Forcing f6, the bishop could come back. And then according to the engines, you have to now kick on to protect this pawn with g5 here. You know, how scary does this look? Pushing these in front of your king. So a really dangerous attack. Alireza wanted no part of it, so he went king to h8, but now Hans is simply better after sinking this knight on d6 here. So Alireza wants to get his pieces into the game. He moves this one into c5, looking to come into e4 here. So Hans goes rook d4, great move, adds some more protection to this square, maybe one day it swings, etc. And so Alireza chops, the pawn recaptures. Yes, he gives black this monster passed pawn supported by dark squared bishop, but at least he lands on e4, and okay, he's still in the game, he's still playing, he hasn't just been squashed yet. But this is where Hans just carries on his initiative now. Great chess. So he crashes through, rook takes on e4, gives this exchange, and in compensation, we can see this dark squared grip he's got, plus pressure against the king. So Alireza goes queen f6, covers some of these dark squared threats, and now Hans goes bishop to d3 here, not necessarily the most testing move. something like bishop e3 looks a bit more normal, because now if bishop f5 from white, I'll just turn on the engine here. Well, this is actually terrible. You go rook to e7. So it's not to say Alireza would have played that and opened up the e-file. Maybe he could go something like this. Seems to be the top engine move. But the point is, you keep your bishop pair on the board. But after bishop to d3, he allows Alireza to do this bishop to f5 stuff. And now the bishops are coming off the board. Now there was a crazy line here, starting with bishop to e5, queen g5, and it all goes on from here. They were analysing afterwards. I don't want to go too deep right now, but this was one way to go that Hans was looking at. But when he got to this position here, he couldn't make bishop e5 work, so he moved the rook, the bishop's chopped, and Alireza is really grateful to see this exchange, because he's got one of those dangerous bishops off the board, and now he can potentially block this pawn on the light squares. So queen f5 played. Great move from Alireza, because now if the pawn kicks on, well, you bring the rook across, you're ready to recoup. That's no good. So queen e3 from Hans. He wants to slide into d2, support this push at the right moment. Alireza brings the rook, the queen drops back. He brings the second rook to the centre here, and now Hans brings his bishop back around. Once again, if you push, this is actually just picking up the pawn, so you really have to be careful. Bishop e3 played, and now this one's bouncing in, looking to hit b6. So Alireza shuts that out, and now g4 was played. Kicks the queen, which is defending the pawn, and you can't hold on here, say with queen to e5, because then, for example, there's rook to d5, and you're still winning this pawn by force. Good position for white. So queen e4 from Alireza. This one was captured, but Alireza takes here. This is the one he picks up. And by the way, if you try and defend, well, black defends their one, so no good. So Alireza takes this one. Now we had bishop d4. You don't take the pawn here. Then we're actually taking on g7, picking up your rook. And if you do a bad move here, like say queen to c6 or something, well, then we're actually crashing through here. We're mating the king. We're using this deadly dark squared bishop, pinning the pawn. This would be mate. So Alireza, of course, sees this. He goes rook to e6, covers this pawn. Now bishop b6 played, the rook slides up, the bishop cements itself, and now here we actually head towards a draw. Now Alireza could have actually checked in this position, king g2, rook e1, start attacking Hans, but after everything that had gone before, queen g3, catching him off guard, he said afterwards he just wanted to get away with a draw here. So instead of going for the check, he goes queen c6, we had rook e3 challenging, these ones come off, and now Alireza simply swaps. Queen recaptures, and we're in this drawn queen endgame, level material. This was how the players repeated the move. Draw agreed. So a very dramatic day of chess. Do let me know your thoughts below. If you want to see another amazing video by Alireza Firouzja, click here. Thanks very much for watching. See you soon.